Abhishek, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's so great to have you here. I'm delighted that we've been able to connect, as we were connected actually by a previous guest on the show, which I always love. And he introduced me to Fewcents. I checked out the product, I checked out what you're doing, and I really got it. I saw the need, I saw how cool the product is, how simple it is to use, and I really wanted to have you on the show to talk about the product. And I'm delighted you're here today. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Nick.
So before getting into Fewcents itself, I'd love to know more about you. Behind every great startup is a great founder, and there's always a great story behind the founder before they actually came to the company that they're working on now. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, it's been a winding road for me. Worked in the industry for about 13, 14 years before I started on the entrepreneurial track. So in 2017, I started my first company. Was fortunate to get an exit on it in 2019. And then 2020, it was also in the media space. It was an ad tech product. And then 2020 came around, and I started Fewcents after that. So it's been good 5-6 years since I've been an entrepreneur.
Amazing. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that previous company and your path to an exit?
Yeah, it was a real need that I had identified in my job. It was an ad tech product for retail brands. And one of the biggest problems retail marketers have is when they advertise online, they might be advertising particular shoes, etc. on Facebook, carousel ads, etc. What they never know is how much of that is translating into sales at the retail store, right? So how much of that, the attribution problem, right? And that's what we set out to solve, and solve it and try to do it as much as possible deterministically. So we ended up building pipes into inventory management systems at the retail stores, right? So the SAPs of the world, the Oracles of the world, the new age inventory management systems, etc. on one side. And on the other side, pipes into the MarTech platforms that enable the ad impressions to go out into the ether and track those clicks at an SKU level, and then correlate those clicks to SKU sales at the retail stores, right? So it was an attribution stack. And in 2019, Affle came around. O2O was just starting to become popular, and omni-channel sort of marketing solution, and attribution was a key gap in the market. And we had a ready product, but we were still very small, so a good target for a big company to acquire. And they were about to go public as well, Affle. So subsequent to our acquisition, they did go public, one of the bankbusters IPOs in India in 2019. And then 2020, COVID happened. So, time to move on.
Exactly. So speaking of moving on then, let's talk a little bit about Fewcents. Can you talk to us about how you came to create the company and where you kind of discovered that there was an opportunity there?
Yeah. So I had some ad tech experience, but then 2020 hit, and we were all, huddled up home and consuming content like maniacs. And all of a sudden, I started to realize that, oh my God, every single quality publisher or creator or influencer is now starting to ask for subscription, one way or another. And that sort of started a chain in my mind, thinking that if every single quality publisher asks me for a subscription, that's not going to fly. Like, I have a limited wallet and bandwidth to incur recurring payments every month, right? Which led me to the thinking that there will be a time when COVID ends, when the markets are not doing so well, etc., that people would think twice about subscriptions, and something called subscription fatigue would actually set in, right? So it was a preemptive sort of thinking that if this is where the world is moving, then bite-sizing content, bite-sizing payments, bite-sizing access to content would be of real value, right? And that's what became Fewcents.
Very cool. What then was your first product that you put out there? What was your MVP and your path to it?
The MVP was actually very simple. I somehow managed to convince a publisher in Indonesia, a small publisher, who said that, look, nobody will ever pay for content. They didn't have subscriptions. And I said, so it doesn't matter if people pay or not. If you try it, it's not going to have any downside for you. If you try putting up the Fewcents wall on your content, it's not going to have really any downside. And it was just the Fewcents wall, right? And I told them that, look, everybody who tries to pay, right, even if payments are not there, I'll pay you for those clicks, right? Instead, and it was a wild success. We saw that even in Indonesia, people are trying to take the next step to make a small payment, right? And the click-through rate, right, which on average in the industry is for ads is 0.06, 0.07%. The click-through rates in this case was about 1%, right? And that really lit a light bulb both for the publisher and for us that, hey, it's got real legs. If there's quality content and if you make it bite-size, pricing it bite-size, and make it super easy for the user to unlock that content, pay for it, etc., then there is real potential in it.
So the success from that first customer is what led you to feel confident to go all in on this concept that is now Fewcents.
That's right. I mean, I had done some surveys on SurveyMonkey and things like that about consumer intent, and I was still not sure, even though the data said that everybody is ready for micropayments, right? But I was still not convinced if they would actually click through and try to make a payment.
Yeah.
Right. So, surveys can only take you so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then again, on Twitter, just heuristically, if you go and just search pay per article, you will see millions of complaints from users all over the world saying that, hey, I will not subscribe to this. I just want to read this one piece of content. Can I make a small payment? Can I pay per article? Right. So it's all over the place on Twitter. And the good news is that this problem is a global problem, right? We are content fanatics by now everywhere, right? From Indonesia to US to Philippines to India, people are consuming digital content like mad, right? So the problem is quite persisting globally.
Yeah, it's a massive problem and presents a massive opportunity for you. Looking through Fewcents, though, it's not just that you're kind of targeting publishers. It seems that you're going into other areas as well. Content creators come to mind as well that I've seen on the site. Can you talk to us a little bit about the different other segments or verticals that you're going after and the product suite as it exists today?
Yeah. So the smaller creators, they have a unique problem, right? They all end up in bed with the TikToks and the YouTubes of the world. It's largely for reach. The challenge creators really have is they really don't know their end users, right? So YouTube might tell you that, hey, okay, 50% of your subscribers or people who have subscribed to your channel are from the US and so on and so forth, but you really don't know who these people are, right? And there is no way that YouTube or TikTok is going to give that information to the creator, right? It's user-generated content. Their whole model is around monetizing UGC and sharing the ad revenue with the creator, right? So there is no way that the creator gets to the end audience, right? So we have a product called Link Out, much like any link in bio product out there, but the traction on that has been fairly small, right? Because most creators are in it not for monetization, but for reach so far, right? That's what we see across the board. And just now, it's starting to happen where TikTok has introduced a paywall as well, an option for a paywall. Um, YouTube has started paid as well, but again, it's under a subscription umbrella uh, with no direct access to the audience or the creator. But TikTok is starting to see that that just ad revenue is not sufficient, right? So we have a product, link out product, but our entire focus right now is still the larger publishers, right? Because the traffic still goes to large publishers in hordes.
For those who haven't yet seen Fewcents, if I'm a publisher, your ICP, what then can I expect? How does the product work for me?
Maybe it's best I show you.
Yeah, sure.
This is Daily Social. It's a publisher based out of Indonesia. And let's just say you land on this content. By the way, most publishers see 70% of their traffic land on content just by the way, right? Because it's referred traffic. It's not like people come to Daily Social and then start searching for content. It just happens to be fed to the user via Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. And people click through and land here, right? Now, when a casual user lands here, over 70, 80% of users are just casual, just happen to be here. This is what they see. They see a wall, which is a Fewcents wall. And this content is locked by Fewcents, right? And we've made the sign-up process, the payments, etc., super easy. So within 2 or 3 clicks, the user has already made a payment and they're back consuming the content, right? So Fewcents gets discovered on the content itself. So we don't go out and market Fewcents directly to the consumer. It's B2B2C.
As a publisher, then, the consumer gets access to the article as a result of putting in their payment details. Do I, as the publisher, get information on that particular consumer?
Yep. The data is co-shared. So we have a data share agreement with every publisher we work with. Much like any ad network, right? If you put in an ad network pixel on your site, then the ad network gets to see your traffic as well, right? So it is the publisher's user, but the user is logging in and paying through Fewcents. So Fewcents gets to see this user as well. But the data is publisher first.
Excellent. And how much data, what kinds of piece of information is shared with that publisher? Is it just email address, or is there any greater depth that's shared with them?
So for login, all we need is a verified email, right? So the publisher gets to see the username and email. They get to see if the user obviously has transacted or not transacted, which is very valuable data in of itself, because it tells you what the pricing should really be for which type of content. So we help publishers price content, right? So how do you price content for which geography? Can we dynamically change the price for a US user versus an Indonesian user, right? So pricing, price discrimination, all of that comes with our product suite in one shot.
It's very cool. I suppose then the natural question here is, it's revenue share. How do you make money, and then how do you set that pricing with the publishers?
So typically we tell publishers to price it at 1/5 of their subscription price as a starting point. And the reason for that is data says that subscribers typically visit the sites that they subscribe to, less than 5 times in a month. So even real subscribers end up engaging with the site less than 5 times in a month. So if you price content as a starting point, at 1/5 of your subscription price, there is a natural tendency for more engaged users to buy the subscription instead, and for less engaged users to buy the a la carte option, right? So that's a starting point. But then our data starts to tell us that, hey, the startup category, in this Daily Socials example, the startup category, we are seeing a lot of conversions at this price point, maybe take the price a bit higher. And on other categories, maybe take the pricing a notch lower, right? Or just don't show Fewcents on this type of content at all because there are no conversions happening, right? Just let that content be free. Right.
You described, I think, that cohort of users or consumers as never subscribers. How do you advise or identify someone who is a never subscriber?
That's a great question, Nick, right? And that's one of the things that is an education in the industry that we are quite keen to get out there. Every publisher, every content creator, they know that their subscription rate will be less than 1%. That is, if you have 100 people coming to your website, less than 1%, less than one user will actually end up subscribing. So even New York Times has 350 million unique visitors, but less than 7 million subscribers, right? So New York Times has a subscription rate of 2%, say. That's after 10 years of being in subscriptions. But most publishers would throw a wild party if they hit 1%, right? So every publisher knows this, that 98, 99% of their audiences are technically never subscribers. What they don't know is which 1% is the real subscriber and which is which. So segmentation becomes super important, right? And we have really good segmentation engine, which allows us to show Fewcents only to never subscribers. As an example, a user has come to your site and you show this user, anonymous user, your subscription paywall. The user rejects it the first time, comes back again a couple of days later, and at this point, we can inject Fewcents because the user has already told us by virtue of not subscribing to you the first time that they're not interested in subscribing, right? Second, a user could be coming from a geography which is not your core geography. So Daily Social is an Indonesian publisher, and likely if there is audience coming to this site from outside Indonesia, they are casual audiences who just happen to land on the site. They are likely not going to subscribe with you. So geofencing is a key capability that we provide to publishers as well. There are many other proxies we have in our system, so publishers can set up those rules and off they go.
It's fascinating. It's really smart. And I've got so many questions that are coming to me right now. I'm thinking back to something you said towards the start of the conversation, which was about subscription fatigue. And I wonder, is one of the advantages of Fewcents that for those consumers who maybe have gone through attrition, they've stopped a subscription with a provider, that actually Fewcents provides a way to re-engage those users who have abandoned, that you can say, well, actually, okay, you're not in the position right now to be able to pay for the full subscription, but actually with this tool, we're able to engage you and you're able to consume content that you previously loved.
Yeah, I mean, so we see many use cases. So much like in e-commerce, if you abandon an e-commerce cart, you get an email afterwards saying that, hey, this is your cart, you abandoned it, some more literature around the products you have in the cart and trying to convince you to take that subscription, right? Or to buy that product. In our case, publishers use this data to send, abandoned cart emails saying that, hey, you didn't buy our subscription, but hey, guess what? You can just buy this piece of content if you're interested, right? At least get into our subscription funnel.
Yes.
Right? So on one hand, it explodes the top funnel for subscriptions for our publishers. And on the other hand, for churned users, for churned subscribers, it's a definite win if they start using Fewcents, at least they are still part of the, the funnel.
It's very smart. There's another aspect of Fewcents that I saw, and I'm wondering if you can talk to this area, and that is about, I think you described it as micro sponsorships as opposed to micro payments. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that and how that works for these publishers.
Right. So Fewcents wall shows up, it locks the content, we manage the access rights to the content, and the user can pay. But also, a brand that is interested in the same audience of Daily Social in this case could advertise on our wall and say, hey, look, we will sponsor this content for you if you are willing to share your data with us. So if the user explicitly opts in to share their data with this advertiser, the advertiser is happy to pay this 50 cents. Right? So it becomes a micro sponsorship with real attribution. Attributions in my gene pool. So once again, right? So from an advertiser lens, this becomes a really high quality CBL campaign.
Yeah, it's very cool. When I saw that, I was very keen to ask you about it because it makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's a great aspect to the solution. I'm then wondering how it is that you go to market. How do you acquire these particular customers for Fewcents?
Yeah, so we have a two-pronged strategy. One is direct to publisher, a lot through cold outreach, right? We have been doing all of our outreach from Singapore so far, but now we are seeing a fair bit of inbound coming from India, US, right? So we are thinking about expanding teams in these markets. So that's one channel, but also partners. We are going to announce a very massive partnership in Japan very soon, where there are vendors who address other needs of the publishers already, right? So there could be a vendor who is helping publishers with advertising solutions, right? Now, that vendor already is working with, I don't know, thousands of publishers. And the vendor knows that advertising is not going to probably remain the mainstay of revenue for all of these publishers going forward. Right. So as much as, the publishers are looking for other solutions to diversify their revenues, so are such vendors. Right. So they can take us to market with their existing publishers as well. Right. So we didn't anticipate channel partnerships coming so early in our go-to market. And again, it came inbound and we realized how quickly this can progress. So that's definitely become a core part of our strategy going forward in India, US as well, right? So these are the two main strategies. And of course, we have a big referral network of consultants. Even Stuart, the founder you interviewed last, he is an advisor with us. So he helps us, get the word out. Right. So the sales motions are very B2B.
Yes. That leads me to a question about partnerships, because I think within the current climate, founders are looking for new ways and cost-effective ways of distributing and getting access to a customer base. I'm wondering, would you have any pieces of advice for founders who are considering channel partnerships to grow their business, and what tips you might have for those founders from your current experience?
To be honest, we've failed at a lot of partnership proposals we have, tried before, right? So in our mind, what we learned is that if it is not inbound, if you are, I would say, pre-Series A, proactively going out and starting sort of a channel partnership proposal, etc., rarely ever works, right? you're just too small for the partner, right? So they're looking to get their match rather than help out a smaller startup, right? So I would recommend most startups to not look at channel partnerships early on until they reach a certain scale.
What would that scale be? What would be some of the characteristics that you'd be looking for, and you'd say, okay, at this point, it makes sense to start looking at channel partnerships?
I mean, it's hard to say I'd say Series A, a legitimate Series A, not the 2021 Series A, right? Is a good indicator of product market fit, right? That where your direct go-to-market channels are working, you've cracked the puzzle. That would be a good point to start exploring channel partnerships, right? It's hard to put a revenue number because it differs for different startups and different industries. But I'd say a legitimate Series A, when you're ready, when you feel you're ready for that, that's a good time to explore or at least give it a shot.
Who should be in charge of establishing those partnerships? Should that be somebody in business development, people who are already doing sales, or should that be founder-led?
I think founder-led early on, these are very different skill sets. People in BD have a completely different gene pool. They're hunters. They want to close, and if you don't have that as your sales team, then you're doing something wrong to begin with. But the partnership person has a very different mindset, right? They are looking very long term. They are trying to find synergies. It's more value based kind of process, right? It's long term, and a lot of processes have to be set in place. So you have to, before you sign a partnership, you have to think of 10 things which are going to come as you get that partner on board, right? So making it super easy for the partner to onboard with you is very critical, right? And it's probably the founder who can actually think of all the steps that would be needed. So for example, Japan, the partnership we're going to announce soon, we we already knew that the moment this starts to take shape, we would have to make sure our wall is bilingual, right? The Fewcents account of the user, when the user actually starts to make a payment, etc., all of that has to be in Japanese as well, right? The management dashboard of the publishers that this partner is going to onboard, that has to be in Japanese as well, right? The sales kit, the training materials, their analytics dashboard, everything, right? So you got to think of how you're going to roll it out and phased approach, and plan that really well with every partnership. So early on, I'd say it's probably the founders who are the best, and they understand the motions that it takes to get a partner onboarded, and also understand what implication does that have on your own team. Do you need to scale up your own support team? Who is going to do the onboarding of the clients coming in through that partner, right? So all of that, all of those processes need to be buttoned up even before the contract is signed, right? So otherwise, even the partner knows it's not going to go anywhere, right? So I think early on, founder, but then after that, get a serious partnerships person who's done it 10 times before.
I think that leads me really nicely on to my next question. You were talking about growing out a team. Your current team, what's the structure of it? And then also, are you looking to grow out the team?
Yeah. So we are Singapore-based. We have regulations around payments, for which Singapore suits us really well. We offer the end user a wallet where the user can actually store value so that they don't have to check out every time, right? And for that purpose, Singapore serves as a good headquarter. So the founders are based here. We met here, but the broader team is in India. And now the scale up with the partnerships coming on board, publishers in different time zones, etc., India seems like a good location, both from a language point of view, where the founders can communicate with the broader team, proximity to Singapore time zones, etc. So the scale up happens both on the business success, onboarding teams, engineering teams. All of that growth in the foreseeable future is out of India.
What does the headcount growth look like over the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
So we are 12 now, really small. If things go well, we are looking at maybe 30, 35 people in the company by end of year. But, markets are tough, so we have to always keep an eye out on our burn and, make do with less, right? So it really depends on how it scales from here, right? So we want to match our costs based on revenue.
That leads me very nicely on to the question of financing and of your approach to maybe fundraising. Are you looking to raise at the moment? The market is a lot more difficult than it has been. And what's your thinking around that, having gone through this before?
I think it's super important for founders to find investors who understand the industry you're operating in, right? So if you don't have that match, then it's an uphill battle. And more often than not, it ends up in a conversation like, hey, it's too early. And they'll need, because the investor is not able to build their own hypothesis around where the market is moving, where the puck is going to be, right? So in the early stages, it's super important to find investors who at least have an idea of where this industry is moving, right? Of course, if you're building in a hype segment, right? Today, if you're building in AI, then it's probably easier to throw darts. Last year, if you were building in Web3, right? So those hype cycles are there, and that's great. So, but if you're building outside of that, then you really need to be surgical about which investors you reach out to, right? So that's my only advice. I don't think fundraising is hard if you're actually building a good company which has a large TAM, right? So I don't think it's that hard. But yeah, like if you're building outside of the hype cycle, then you have to be surgical on who you reach out to.
Are you planning on going to the market to raise for Fewcents?
We are raising a small round now, largely to expand India and US BD efforts. So we are raising a small round, not a big one.
Are there any interesting roadmap items that you're free to talk about that we can be excited by coming down the line?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that's going to come out is, the network effects play, where Fewcents is building a user graph of which user is consuming what type of content, what price are they willing to pay for which type of content, from which geography, all of that, right? Now, the next step from here is that Fewcents starts to recommend more content to the users within the Fewcents network, right? So we are super excited about that. And all of a sudden, not only do we provide the micro access solution to publishers, but we also provide audiences, new audiences to publishers, right? So we start to take shape of a network, right? So today, the publishers view us primarily as a micro access layer with micro payments and micro sponsorships. But going forward, we become an audience development engine as well, right? So we are super excited about that. It's a tough nut to crack. The only worst thing you can do in this is sending the wrong recommendation, right? So you got to test it and back test it a few times, your AI, before you actually roll it out. So I think it's still probably a couple of quarters away, but I'm personally super excited when that actually goes live.
That sounds fascinating and really exciting. I can't wait to see that as well. Abhishek, I don't know why this is exactly. Maybe it's not a coincidence, but I'd say about 40 to 50% of the guests so far on the show have gone through the experience of successfully exiting a previous startup. And I'd like to ask you, as I've asked them as well, about their experience of that, but more particularly, what advice would you give to another founder who is maybe at that stage where they're starting conversations with prospective buyers? What might be your kind of top 2 or 3 tips for those founders as they're considering an exit?
I'm a firm believer in inbound. Almost always works better if the interest is inbound, right? So I've never done a proactive outbound exit, so I probably can't speak to that, what the strategies might be behind that. But put yourself in the right place to be discovered by the right buyer.
What might be some of the pitfalls that people should look out for when exiting? And actually, when is the right moment? When do you think is the indications for founders say, do you know what, an exit is appropriate now, as opposed to continuing on with this under our own umbrella?
Yeah, I can only probably speak about my experience and why I decided to exit. So it was a B2B solution, catering to retail brands. And as a naive founder, what I completely missed is that in retail, the marketing decisions or the marketing tech stack decisions are almost always based out of the headquarters, right? So Singapore was probably not the best place to have originated this business, right? There was no regulatory reason to be based out of Singapore. So, trying to get to the larger brands was extremely difficult without having feet on street in the markets, in the Spains of the world, which are sort of the nerve centers of fashion, retail, US, other parts of Europe, China even, right? So the go-to market was actually something which I knew that I had to probably raise a lot for me to establish the right go-to market for this. Within Singapore, Southeast Asia, and India, as much as we could, a lot of retail is run as a franchise operation, right? So you can only go so far with a franchisee investing in a tech product, as opposed to going to the main brand, right? So I would say if you are building good product, have decent traction, but go-to-market is becoming challenging without sort of having funding in place, etc. It's probably not going to scale much after that, right? So it's probably good to find a buyer who can complement that go-to-market gap for you, right? And Affle was just that for Shoffr, where they had feet on street and markets. It's a large company. It was about ready to go IPO. So the marriage made total sense.
In your previous startup, you had investors. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, we had Techstars, right? So we had raised a small round from Techstars, right? So and then friends and family were there.
Okay, yeah. My question was going to be about how did you overcome maybe particular terms or convincing investors that this was the right time to sell, because sometimes founders can have terms in their sheets which basically make it difficult.
We didn't have those terms, but even for Techstars, it was pretty evident to them as well that to really scale this, we would need to hit the headquarters of the retail brand, and until we had access or, feet on street, we were not going to do that, right? There's no way we could crack Nike globally sitting in Singapore, right? So, they're right on board. They're like, this makes total sense. They got a multiple, small one, but they did. And, it was a happy ending for everyone.
Excellent. Well, Abhishek, this has been fantastic. I've had such a good time chatting to you, learning more about Fewcents, the opportunity that you're tackling, the massive TAM that you're going after. And I can't wait to see what you do next as you grow out the team, as you roll out this partnership, as you roll out these new features. I can't wait to see what happens next. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks a lot, Nick. It was amazing.